Good morning. We start this morning with general questions, and our first question is from Maureen Watt.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking in response to concerns regarding the number of hoax calls to the emergency services in Aberdeen.
Minister Ashdenham.
The Scottish Government condemns the making of any hoax calls to our emergency services, although it is important to note that these calls reflect a very small percentage of the overall calls received. Hoax calls are not victimless pranks, but can distract and divert vital resources and attention away from those who are in life-threatening situations. There are established UK-wide processes in place with BT for emergency services to deal with those who abuse the 999 service, which, depending upon circumstances, can constitute a criminal offence.
Maureen Watt.
I thank the Minister for that response, and I'm sure she will wish to join with me in thanking the hard work and dedication of our emergency services staff, particularly at this time of year. Can I ask how the Scottish Government plans to work, for example, with the Scottish Ambulance Service and the police to take appropriate action, perhaps through publicity, to try and tackle this issue?
Ashdenham.
Our emergency service staff do amazing work every day, keeping the people of Scotland safe and well, often under challenging circumstances, and they fully deserve our thanks and gratitude, particularly at this time of year when demand on services can be very high. And the Government is committed to doing all it can to support our emergency services in actions that they take to reduce instances of hoax calls, such as working closely with partners and local communities to reduce false alarms and increase understanding of the impact of these calls. The Scottish Ambulance Service use social media to advise patients during periods of high demand to only call the service if it is an emergency, as part of their winter communications plan, and they will be warning of the impact of hoax calls through that plan.
Thank you. Question to Gail Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it supports exports of renewable energy technology.
Minister Ivan McKee.
Thanks to the commitment and targets introduced by the Scottish Government and the expertise and entrepreneurialism of our energy sector, Scotland is already a global centre of excellence in renewables. Scottish Renewables Report, Scotland's Green Energy Export Impact, published earlier this year, highlighted that Scottish renewable energy businesses are already exporting to 72 countries. The Scottish Onshore Wind Energy Council, co-chaired by my colleague Mr Wheelhouse, is not only looking to maximise supply chain content of Scottish and UK projects, but also how to support the supply chain to compete for overseas contracts, and they've already engaged with administrations in California, Massachusetts and New Jersey regarding offshore wind opportunities. We want to build on this success and to grow a successful and competitive global supply chain.
Gail Ross.
Thank the Minister for that answer. Can he outline what support is given to small and medium-sized businesses in the sector, such as JIGC Engineering in my constituency?
Minister.
I thank Gail Ross for that supplementary, and as it happens, I met with JIGC Engineering in Boston when I was there recently with a delegation of Scottish renewable energy businesses looking to export to Massachusetts. There was a very successful meeting between myself and the Governor of Massachusetts, Charlie Baker, in this connection to promote the technology we can export from Scotland. And Scottish businesses, including in the renewable energy sector, are supported through the additional £20 million over the next 3 years that the Scottish Government is investing to grow Scottish exports around the world.
Neil Findlay.
I'm pleased to hear we're investing to grow exports around the world, but what's the Minister doing to ensure that wind turbines and wind energy projects in Scotland are supplied by companies from Scotland instead of the farcical situation where we see turbines being imported from Indonesia to Fife and only a few yards away the BiFab yard standing empty?
Minister.
Mr Findlay will be aware the Scottish Government stepped in to support BiFab. We are working with them to identify opportunities. We are identifying where we can I support them with getting contracts. At the end of the day, it's a commercial business, but we are also taking very seriously any suggestions that there is unfair competition, and we are looking to support and intervene to identify and make those in any regard to anything that is deemed as unfair competition internationally. But the Scottish Government is hugely focused on the sector. We want to build the supply chain up, and as I said, our intervention in BIFAB is precisely for that reason, to ensure that we maintain the opportunity and the technology in Scotland, and to support where we can to work with private sector businesses to invest in Scottish supply chain to provide jobs in Scotland in the renewable energy sector.
And Gillian Martin.
Thank you, President Officer. Can the Minister outline the sort of policies that the UK Government has so far failed to deliver that would incentivise investment in renewable technology?
Minister.
Scotland's technology is in a world-leading position, and I came just this morning from an event at the City of Glasgow College talking with international opportunities about how we can further export that technology. The UK Government, however, hasn't been helpful in that regard, and the member will know that their failure to follow through on the carbon capture scheme and the way they've changed the contracts for difference so that onshore wind isn't supported has not helped Scotland's drive to support our renewable energy sector and use the technology, the world-leading technology that we have, to develop and export more internationally.
Question 3, David Torrance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what progress it is making in developing the draft statutory code of practice for funeral directors.
Minister Joe Fitzpatrick.
The Scottish Government is committed to ensuring that everyone in Scotland receives the care, dignity and respect in death that they would wish in life. Although there are no statutory regulations of funeral directors or their businesses in any part of the UK, we are working to change that in Scotland by introducing new statutory standards for funeral directors, underpinned by a licensing and inspection regime. Earlier this year, I published the Funeral Director Code of Practice for consultation. Once finalised, the code will set out statutory standards for funeral directors, which must be complied with. This will be a significant step forward in ensuring consistency of standard of care across Scotland. The analysis of the consultation responses will be available early next year, and the code itself will be published later next year.
David Torrance.
Following recent reports of alleged fraudulent scheme linked to 5 funeral directors, which has impacted on a number of my constituents, can the Cabinet Secretary clarify whether financial regulation for industry is under consideration for inclusion as part of any future code of conduct?
Minister.
The Scottish Government believes that the regulation of the prepaid funeral market plan should be strengthened. As a reserved matter, we are urging the UK Government to take action to ensure that there is sufficient protection in place for people taking out funeral plans, and will continue to call on the UK Government to take action in this area. The Scottish Government Code of Practice focuses on raising standards of transparency of service offered by funeral directors and standards of care of people who have died.
Rona Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As the Cabinet Secretary has said, the purpose of the draft statutory code of practice is to ensure that every person in Scotland has a dignified and respectful funeral. How will a newly developed funeral support payment ensure that this is the case even for those who struggle to pay for funerals?
Minister.
Thank the member for the question. The funeral support payment is there to help people on low-income benefits who might otherwise struggle to pay for a funeral. We've substantially widened eligibility for the payment compared to the former DWP payment, and will help 40% more people each year. In total, around 5,000 people each year will receive support. Moreover, we've developed the new funeral support payment in line with our social security principles to treat all clients with dignity, fairness and respect.
Question number 4, John Mason.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to reduce the amount of time that the police spend assisting people with mental health issues on matters that should not require their presence.
Minister Claire Hawkey.
Firstly, I would like to thank the member for raising this important issue. The Scottish Government, Police Scotland and partners are committed to working together to ensure that the right service can provide the right response for individuals experiencing mental ill health. It is widely recognised that Police Scotland plays a significant role in assisting and safeguarding individuals who present to services in emotional or mental health distress, or who are vulnerable in a variety of ways. We have a collective responsibility to address the complex issues which arise from mental ill health. Police Scotland are working hard with partners to gain a clear picture of mental health demand, so we can fully understand the demand that this places upon our frontline officers, and importantly, so we can work together to deliver the best outcomes for individuals. We are continuing to deliver on the commitments set out in our programme for government to develop a 21st century approach to adult mental health, including our intention to establish a new adult mental health collaborative, the creation of the new multi-agency distress intervention group to develop and oversee new approaches to improving collaborative responses to distress, and we are on course to deliver our commitment of 800 additional mental health workers in 4 priority settings: A&E, GP practices, custody suites and prisons.
John Mason.
I thank the Minister very much for that answer. I'm glad there's progress being made. But, I mean, as I spent a day with the police in August, this subject came up repeatedly. And, for example, if a police officer takes someone with mental health issues to accident emergency, they then have to stay at accident emergency with the person. And that could be for some time. And I just wonder if there is not another system that somebody from the health service could take over and release the police officers.
Minister.
As I stated in my response earlier to John Mason, we know that police officers often play a significant and valuable role in assisting those in mental health distress. However, it's crucial we develop a strong collaborative approach with public services, the third sector and communities working together to improve support for those with mental ill health. Police Scotland's new call handling approach is currently being rolled out across Scotland and is already helping the service to respond more effectively to demand, putting resource where it is most needed and ensuring that people receive the support that best meets their needs. Working with other partners to address risk and vulnerability is a key feature of this approach. Additionally, a new mental health hub service has been operational since March 2019, and it delivers dedicated support to people contacting Police Scotland in mental health distress, where calls are referred to psychological wellbeing practitioners. The Distress Intervention Group I mentioned in my previous answer, of which Police Scotland are a key partner, will provide strategic leadership across the Scottish justice, health and social care sector to ensure that more effective pathways are available to people presenting to public services in distress.
And David Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Could I endorse Mr Mason's concerns? Will the Minister examine again the supply and availability of medium and low secure facilities for those with serious mental health issues, as raised at the Health and Sport Committee this week?
Minister.
I thank Mr Stewart for that question. He will be aware that we currently have a review into all of our forensic mental health services led by Derek Barron, which we expect to report in the summer of next year. The remit of that review covers both high, low and medium and community forensic mental health services.
And question number 5, Jackie Bailey.
To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to concerns that the out-of-hours services at the Vale of Leven, Inverclyde Royal and Royal Alexandra hospitals are not functioning effectively.
Cabinet Secretary Jean Freeman.
I agree that the current situation isn't acceptable, and I am aware of the challenges faced by Glasgow's out-of-hours services. These out-of-hours services covering Greater Glasgow and Clyde are currently under review, and as part of that, Glasgow are recruiting 70 salaried GPs to work in the service. Recruitment started in early September this year, and they have so far recruited 7 salaried GPs. It is important that Glasgow continue recruiting at pace to fill these posts, and that they take on board the advice they have commissioned from Sir Lewis Ritchie on how to deliver a more sustainable out-of-hours service.
Jackie Bailey.
The Cabinet Secretary for that response. Out of hours at the Vale of Leven has been closed from January to September this year for 128 days alone, and there have been more closures in October and November. In fact, it's closed more often than it's actually open, and there are problems at Inverclyde and the Royal Alexandra Hospital in Paisley. The result is that people end up at A&E when they don't need to go there, and waiting times increase. The Cabinet Secretary, I am sure, will share my frustration that NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde seem incapable of organising out-of-hours rotas. What can she do to ensure that this most basic of emergency services is provided in my local area?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm grateful to Ms Bailey for her supplementary question. She will recall when I visited Vale of Leven and with her and with others there, we had what I thought was a very productive discussion with local GPs about the work that they currently undertake and how they could expand that. I would share her disappointment that we have not yet seen that realised. I do think those local discussions are the route by which we can resolve some of these out-of-hours matters. I couldn't agree more with her that if out-of-hours doesn't work, along with the other areas that people can go to in terms of Pharmacy First and the use of NHS 24, then actually what we see is unscheduled care that is appropriate appearing at our A&Es, as opposed to the current situation driven often by people not knowing where else to go. So I am prepared today in the Chamber to make my commitment to Ms Bailey that I will not only pursue the discussions that I thought we had productively had at Vale of Leven, but I will also be talking to Greater Glasgow and Clyde on this, as of course on other matters, about exactly how they are proposing to improve their out-of-hours service and its delivery. And I'm happy to keep Ms Bailey updated on that.
Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, does the Cabinet Secretary consider it unacceptable that GPs from Inverclyde are regularly used to cover elsewhere within the Health Board area, but the reciprocal arrangements don't seem to apply, in addition to the most recent figures from the Health Board revealing that out-of-hours service closed 40 times in the whole of 2018, with that rising to 77 up to the 17th of November this year alone?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm grateful to Mr McMillan. No, so I don't consider it unacceptable that GPs across a cohort of areas, for example, Greater Glasgow and Clyde, cooperate and help cover for each other. What isn't acceptable is if that is not reciprocal and cooperative. So again, as part of what I have said in response to Ms Bailey, I will pick this up with Greater Glasgow and Clyde and look to see, and indeed, in fact, with the BMA GP committee, who I think we have productive relationships with, to ask what more can be done in order to ensure that there is that reciprocity and that willingness to ensure that there is cover across the piece. But the core of this is actually to fix it out of our service in Greater Glasgow and Clyde.
Thank you. Question number 6, Alison Harris.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government when it last met NHS Forth Valley to discuss the board's performance.
Cabinet Secretary Jean Freeman.
I met the Chair and Chief Executive of NHS Forth Valley on Monday the 2nd of December when I chaired the board's mid-year review.
Alison Harris.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her answer. In December last year, NHS Forth Valley was escalated to level 3 on the NHS Board Performance Escalation Framework, requiring tailored support. Whilst there have been improvements in A&E waiting times, and Forth Valley is no longer level 3 on the framework, in 2018-19 it missed 6 of its 8 national waiting times targets, and the areas which seemed to be improving have begun to slip again. 1 year on from the last escalation, is the Cabinet Secretary confident that Forth Valley will not be escalated again within a year?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I'm grateful to Ms Harris for her supplementary question. It is really important to understand that we do not escalate boards lightly, and that when we do, it is about providing the additional tailored support that they need in order to help them improve their performance. Of course, that tailored support ranges from what might be there at level 2 or 3 to what might be the case at level 5, where our intervention is much more direct. She is right. In terms of Forth Valley, there have been improvements in A&E. There have also been very welcome improvements in their 31-day cancer target, with the most recent figures showing 100% meeting of that target. The discussion that we had on Monday was what more they are doing to improve on their 62-day target. TTG is improving, but in terms of outpatients, there is more to be done. So at this point, my focus is on making sure that the board have the right plans in place, the right recruitment options in place, the right financial performance, in order to ensure that when I do their next annual review, we have seen considerable improvements in their performance.
Gil Patterson.
Many thanks, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary will be aware that a Labour MSP has attacked the Golden Jubilee Hospital in my constituency for using a mobile cath lab on a temporary basis, as is done throughout the United Kingdom. Is it not an utter disgrace that Labour are willing to undermine this hospital, which has an exemplary record
an exemplary record and put vulnerable people in doubt at the worst time in their lives, that's having a heart attack, which could cause them not to report the heart attack speedily, thus putting their lives in jeopardy.
I'm not entirely sure that hospital is in the Forth Valley, but Cabinet Secretary can give a very brief answer, please.
Well, in fact, Golden Jubilee does cover patients from the Forth Valley area, so, and I do agree with the member. I really do think members need to decide, do you want us to focus on delivering high-quality patient care in a timely fashion, or do you want to make political points because NHS in Scotland is doing what NHS in Wales is doing, what NHS in England is doing, and that is ensuring that we have the resources on time, in place, in order to deliver that quality. Personally, I'm interested in delivering high-quality patient care, not cheap political points.